Anytime you're shortcutting it, you're probably cheating some people. Players play. Tough players win.
Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the Centered Podcast. For those of you joining us for the very first time ever, my name is Anthony Ianni. I'm a former Michigan State basketball player, as well as the first Division I college basketball player in NCAA history with autism. If you'd like to see other episodes of the Centered Podcast, you can find those episodes on Apple, Spotify, as well as Odyssey.com. If you would like to see today's video interview, please subscribe to our YouTube channel, which is the Centered Podcast. Again, thank you guys so much for joining me. I hope you guys are having an incredible week so far, incredible month of August. Like I said last episode, we are nearing the end of the summer, so enjoy those summer days as much as you can, because before you know it, it's going to be fall and football season will be upon us. But speaking of football, my guest today is somebody who I met about around 8 years ago at when I was working at the Autism Alliance of Michigan. And so Autism Alliance of Michigan has a gala every year in Detroit. And I met this gentleman at the gala, and we just started talking. I knew who he was from his days calling Detroit Lion games on the radio. And we just sat down and started talking. And we just talked. He gave me his number, and we've been in touch ever since. And that is Fox 2 Detroit's own news anchor and sports director, Dan Miller. For those of you who don't know who Dan is not only a sports anchor and sports director for Fox 2 News in Detroit, but Dan is also the play-by-play commentator for your Detroit Lions. Some of you listening to this may not like the Lions, but after this episode today, you might like them a little more. Who knows? But just I wanted to have Dan on because I wanted to get to know him more as a person. His days growing up in Washington, D.C., Northern Virginia, his days of growing up and watching the Washington Bullets, the Washington football team, known as, at the time known as the Washington Redskins, now the Washington football team, and just watching a lot of baseball. And, we got to, talk about a little bit more about his days as a commentator, a beat writer for the Washington football team, and then his days as a play-by-play commentator for NFL on Fox's regional broadcast. So, and of course, the big one I want to talk about was the Detroit Lions. So, super excited for you guys to listen to this episode today. And Dan and I talked about a lot, but enough of me talking. Let's get right into it. Here's our interview with Detroit Lions and Fox 2's own Dan Miller. First and foremost, man, it's great to see you. Thanks for coming on the show.
Well, it's good to see you, and it's good to be here, man. It's weird these days. You feel like you really haven't seen anybody for so long that when you see somebody, whether it's on Zoom or in person, it's a good feeling.
Oh, it is, for sure. And I can't remember when the last time you and I saw each other face to face. It was probably a long time ago, but we've been communicating back and forth via text. But, I was just telling my producer, Will, I said, we got to have Dan on because number one, I haven't seen Dan in forever. I haven't talked to him forever. But number two, I kind of want to get to know him a little bit more. And so you were definitely one of the guys that I had on my list when it came to who I wanted to talk to on the podcast.
Well, I appreciate that. And I'm such a big fan of yours and so proud of you for everything that you've done. I have a son with autism, so I have just watched you from afar and talked to you from time to time. And I'm just, you've done so much for so many people that anything you ever need from me, you got it.
I appreciate that, Dan, and I always will. So, but let's get right into it, brother. So you were born in D.C., raised in Northern Virginia. Kind of talk about, life as a young Dan Miller growing up in D.C. and Northern Virginia.
Yeah, I mean, I had a very lucky childhood where I had a lot of friends that kind of fed into what I ultimately did with my life. We moved from College Park, Maryland, to Northern Virginia, a place called Reston, when I was 8 years old. And I moved into this amazing neighborhood with all these kids my age. And it really kind of introduced me into, baseball, basketball, football, and all these things that we just did year round. and it just became my passion. So it was really just, it was amazing because it was, my memories are just going out and playing every day and learning to love these sports, and then learning to love professional sports, and reading the newspaper and just soaking everything in that I could. So really, I when I trace back to what I am now, I look at it as I decided really early on I wanted to do something in sports so much.
Now, did you know right away, like when you talk about you want to do something in sports, did you like, was it trying to play at the next level, or was it always like from the media perspective and trying to be a broadcaster?
Believe me, I would have loved to have played at the next level. That wasn't going to happen. I was lucky enough to play baseball and basketball in high school, but there's a weeding out process as you go along, and that's where I got weeded out. So once you realize that's not going to happen, you start looking around, and really early on, I was drawn to the guys that were on TV, and I was drawn to the guys that did sports and would tell me about what was happening, and guys like Warner Wolf, who was big in DC, and George Michael and Glenn Brenner, and Frank Herzog, who was also the voice of the Washington, the Redskins at the time, the football team now. So, I was in tune to what they were doing, and I can tell you from the age I was 8, I would look at guys doing sports on TV, and I said, that's what I want to do. And I would watch, the football shows on TV, and watch the highlights that they did, which obviously is nothing compared to what we do now, but it was still captivating to me, and it was intoxicating to me. And it was really something I fell in love with at an early age.
So you played several sports as a kid, and some of those sports were basketball, football, and baseball. Out of those 3 sports that you liked, that you played as a young kid, and out of the 3 sports that you watched growing up, what was kind of like your favorite out of those 3 that you would love to watch and pay attention to the most?
That's tough. I played organized baseball and basketball. Football, I played in the neighborhood. I was too skinny to do anything else. I mean, I weighed 138 pounds my senior year in high school, so I was going to get knocked around if I went out there. But the Washington football team, I mean, I guess you just can't call them by their name anymore, but the Washington football team, and I understand why. So it's just hard for me to get used to that when you grow up saying it. But we had season tickets to the games. So my dad would take me to the games, and I fell in love with them. And that was just an amazing passion of mine to be able to spend that time with my dad, who wasn't even really a sports fan, but he fed into what I wanted to do. And then the Bullets, when I was growing up, that was kind of my second love. We didn't have a baseball team in DC. The Caps came along when I was 11, 12 years old. Okay. But it was kind of a magical time, because the football team started to get good right around 1971, when I became cognizant of what was going on. You had the Bullets that went to the championship series 4 times in the 70s and won a championship in the 70s. So, and I remember games not being on TV, and you just sit by the radio and listen to them. And I think that had a huge impact on me as well, was just listening to these guys tell me the story. And that kind of made me one day want to do that as well. So, I think it was basketball and football on a professional level that I really, really was into when I was young.
And you kind of talked about too how, when you watch games, especially now today in the field that you're in, you get to be around great individuals, not just athletes, but folks in the front office. And I think for me, that was one of the many highlights I loved about my dad's job when he was associate and deputy athletic director of Michigan State, was I got to be around like all these great players and all these great coaches and teams, which kind of made it even more memorable for me. And from what it's, go ahead.
Yeah, no. And that's a great point. I am very much, intrigued by successful people and what makes them successful. And you're right. I've had the opportunity to be around, whether it's in the business that I'm in now, or covering players that I've covered, or coaches that I've covered, or there's a reason those people are successful, and you can learn from them by watching them and how they conduct themselves. And believe me, a lot of what I've become is because of things that I have gotten from other people and things that I've learned from other people. And I think it's so important that anybody does that, because you're ultimately yourself. You're you, and that's what makes you different. But you can certainly pull things from others that can help make you successful. And I've absolutely done that along the way. And that's part of, taking note of these people that you described as being so successful in whatever their given field might have been.
I want to ask you this. So, obviously my dad is one of my biggest influences and inspirations in my life. And I read that your dad was not a big sports fan at all when you were a young kid. So how were you able, so like when you were playing your sports and you were watching the games at home, basketball, baseball, football, how did you have to like help him out at all, when it came to like, calls or penalties or, just the rules of basketball, baseball, or football at that time?
He just kind of really wasn't into it. I mean, he got into it when I played, and he got into it when he would see me on the court or see me on the baseball field. That's when he really became in tune to what was going on. But when we would get home and I would sit down and watch a game, or I would go watch a game with my friends, he wasn't watching the game. He was doing something else around the house. It just really wasn't a passion for him. I mean, I would sit and watch football games with my mom. She was into it, but my dad was just never a huge fan. But, it means so much to me that he knew that that was my passion. So he did whatever he could to help promote that with me, took me to games, even though, he was probably bored being there, but he knew how much it meant to me to go to a professional basketball game or an NFL game, or, we used to go see the Bullets. We lived in College Park, Maryland, like I said, until I was 8. They used to play every once in a while at Cole Fieldhouse at the University of Maryland. So we would go there, and it was just, he did whatever he could to help promote what was clearly, a very healthy involvement in sports for me. So while he wasn't into it, unless I was playing, or he wasn't into it, he still, and it makes me think about, things I do with my kids and things my kids do that I don't get, or frankly don't care about. I think it makes you so that you still have to lend an ear and you still have to be involved. And I lean back on what my dad did for me sometimes when I think, do I really care about, this video game that they're playing or something like that?
Right.
But you do, because it's important to them.
No, absolutely. And I think that's what makes a great parent, is that you want to do things. Well, I shouldn't say want to do it. Sometimes you have to do things with your kids that you may not want to do sometimes. And my 6-year-old, there are times where, he wants me to go in the toy room and play Pop-A-Shot with him in the toy room. And there may be days where I'm like, oh, I don't know, but it's like, okay, it's Pop-A-Shot, go in there and throw up 4 shots and see what he can do the rest of the time. So, but I've always felt like, that's what makes a great parent, is like doing the little things that are bigger than life for your kids.
It is. And it's something that, I know there are times I could have been better at. And there are times that, you're just tired and it's something that you're not interested in. But, I do lean back on what he did for me and how impactful that was for me. And that kind of gets you motivated sometimes to go out there and do it. But it's, and I'm sure it was that way for him, but it's just, there's a different world in terms of what kids today are interested in, as opposed to, it's just so foreign to me, some of the stuff that they're into and dealing with and stuff like that. And it's like it's an effort to understand some of the things that they're doing, be it some of the things in social media, video games, whatever it is. But again, it's what you do for them. And hopefully it promotes the same kind of passion that I had promoted in me.
So after high school, I got to ask you this question because I read about this and I was like, wow, like, he got away with that and still had a job after all those years. And I think you know where I'm going with this. So before graduating high school, you got a job with, some mutual radio network affiliates. And they asked you in your interview if you knew how to edit audio tape, and you flat out lied and told them, yeah, I can. And yet you still kept that job for 11 years. Like, did they ever discover that you didn't know how to do it, or did you just learn how to do it along the way?
Well, it was one of those things, Anthony, where the Mutual Radio Network would hire college kids and maybe some people that were out of college to produce their shows on the weekend. And you would go in, and we had shows every half hour starting at, 8:30, 9 o'clock in the morning. There'd be 5-minute sports updates that would go across the country. And we'd produce them. We'd edit the audio tape, which I'll get back to in a second. And we'd put the scoreboards together, whatever it was we would do. And my baseball coach in high school, who's also a very close family friend, was working there. And he said, hey, they got an opening. This was April, May of my senior year in high school. And he said, you should just go apply. You're going to be in college next year anyway. So I did. And he goes, look, they're going to ask you if you know how to edit audio tape. Just say yes. He goes, everybody basically goes through it. And everybody says yes, even though the moment you walk in the door, you may not. But within a couple of weeks of being there, they've taught you how to do it. The other guys that are your age, your peers that are back in the edit bays, just take you through it and teach you how to do it. So it probably sounds more significant than it actually was, because you would have 4 guys in an edit bay. It was a different time. You'd have 4 guys in an edit bay, probably doing the job that one could do, and you learned how to do the job. And it was pretty much the standing marching orders that people would say, hey, if they ask you to know how to edit, just say you know how to edit, because after a couple of weeks, you're going to know how to edit.
What do you think? You talk about, the times that change. So when you first started up, obviously, what has changed between the days when you first started up and now in 2021?
Well, it's so much easier now to facilitate some of the things that we had to work hard to do back then. We had to use, Comrex boxes, double 900 lines, whatever it was to get good quality audio from certain events, or things that you can just do with a wire now. And, we would have to, feed things in through a cassette tape recorder, whereas now it's just a little recorder that's digital, and I don't even know how to work them. Other guys do. But so it's just that there's been so many improvements that have made things easier to be a reporter, and easier to take the material that they might send you and ultimately get it on the air. You're not working with big reel-to-reel tapes anymore and editing them with a razor blade and things like that. It's a much more streamlined operation. So just things have gotten easier to do, less manpower needed, which in some ways is good, and others, makes it more difficult for people to find jobs. So I just say it's probably the natural evolution of, the advancements that we make in all fields that have also been a part of, radio and certainly television. I mean, television, you talked to Brandy about when he started, you had to shoot film and then take it back. And he and I had this conversation, and I never worked, under these circumstances. I kind of came in maybe a step or two later, but you had to take film, you had to bring it back, you had to develop it, and then you could find a way to edit. And it was a long process. Whereas now, boom, we shoot it through a camera, and we can either send it back live or we send it back, 2 minutes later. It's a different world. And it's like any other business, I'm sure, just in the way that it's changed through technology.
And it's funny you talk about the technology piece and how, where back in the day you would have to actually take the film back to the studio, whereas now you could just put it in the truck, the news truck, and it'll go right back to the news station. I've always thought like just the little things like that were really interesting, and like you talked about, just how much has changed, but from, a manpower standpoint and making things easier, it's definitely become that in the news world right now.
Well, I mean, I can even tell you, starting in TV, when I first got into TV was in the mid 90s, you'd walk into a studio and you had, a guy behind every camera, a guy running the sound, a floor director. I mean, now there might be one of those people working in there, maybe two, but cameras are all robotic. It's not like there's somebody back there wheeling it around anymore.
Yeah.
So it's, those are unfortunately jobs that are eliminated. And it's a much more streamlined process from the field to the edit bay, to the studio, to the control room. Just it's all changed so much, even since I got into the business, which, feels like a long time ago, but in real world time, it's just incredible advancements that have happened very quickly.
You mentioned the mid 90s, and I want to get into that right now when your career really got started. So you got a job with Radio 570 in Washington, D.C. as an overnight talk show host and a Redskins beat reporter. So when you first started out as a beat reporter, do you think it was tough covering a team as a beat reporter, or do you think it was a little easier back in the day? Or do you think being the play-by-play guy for the lines is a little bit tougher than being a beat writer?
Well, I mean, let me say this I didn't want to be a beat writer. I had left a job and taken a pretty significant pay cut. I was working at Westwood One / NBC. I think we had a couple heading titles then, and doing sports updates. And at the time, making decent money. And I kind of looked at it and I said, there wasn't a lot of room for me to grow there. I'd kind of maxed out. And I felt like, okay, I can probably stay here for the next 15 or 20 years, but where am I going to be?
Right.
And whether or not that ended up being true is not important, but I wanted to do something else. And a lot of these sports radio stations were popping up. And I had a friend who was running the one in DC, and we started talking. He said, do you want to do an overnight show? And obviously there wasn't a lot of money in an overnight show. So I took a pretty significant pay cut, and I went there in August of 92. And I got approached by people at the station a couple of weeks into that football season. They had fired the person who was doing their beat reporting, and they said, we want you to do it. And I told them I don't want to do it. I said, I came here to do a talk show. That's what I want to do. They said, take 24 hours and think about it. Came back 24 hours later, said, I don't want to do it. Said, I want to do a talk show. That's what I came here to do. And they said, well, you're going to do it. So I ended up, heading out to the team's facility every day, covering the team. And it was tough at the beginning. And I didn't understand a lot of the things that went into building contacts and covering a team. But go back to what we talked about earlier, which was learning from people that are really good. I went out there, and there were guys like David Aldridge and Richard Justice, who were two of the best beat reporters ever, anywhere, covering that team. And I just kind of watched what they did. They were friends. They were very nice people. They helped me. And I think that helped me kind of figure things out as I moved forward, was watching what they did. So, you kind of learned on the job how to do it. And I'm sure, I wasn't real good at the beginning, and you figured it out and you moved forward. But in the long run, it was one of the best things that ever happened to me, because I made so many contacts by being out there and got to know so many people, compared to not meeting a lot of people when you're sitting in a studio by yourself at 2 a.m. doing a talk show, which I didn't mind, but it was one of those things that in life, it didn't work out the way that you thought it would, but it absolutely worked out for the best.
So did those initial contacts that you made and built up as a beat reporter, did that kind of like open the door for you a little bit to get your first job on TV at WTTG?
Yeah, there's no question. I was covering the football team. I was doing daily updates for the radio station, and I was doing some appearances on local television, like as a roundtable guest. And one day I walked into the radio station, and I picked up my voicemail, and I had a message from somebody I did not know at Channel 5, WTTG, the Fox station in Washington, saying, we're looking for a co-host, not a co-host, but a field reporter for our NFL pregame show on Sundays. They did a pregame show for the football team on Sundays. And I'm like, what is this? And where did this come from? So I called the guy up, and he said they were a week into the season. And the guy that they had hired to do it had missed a hit or two the week before, and he had been let go. So they needed somebody like that week. So this was a Monday. I think I went to lunch with him on Tuesday. He's asking me all these questions about experience and things like that. And don't have a lot of great answers, because I probably didn't have the experience that he was looking for. And I could kind of tell I didn't think it was going real well. So we got up to leave, and I just said to him, his name was Duffy Dyer, same name as the former Mets catcher. I said to him, I said, look, I know I don't have the experience that you're looking for, but I can do this job. And he kind of looked at me and didn't really give me much after I said
Mhm.
that. And then the next day he called and offered me the job. And I ended up, I believe there was a night game in Philadelphia was my first game that I ended up doing. And that was kind of the break that got me into television because, it's what I had wanted to do, Anthony. But when I had gotten out of school, I'd tried to get jobs everywhere. I couldn't get hired. I mean, I was trying to get jobs in all the small markets where you're supposed to start, but I couldn't get hired anywhere. I couldn't get somebody to give me a job that was going to pay me, $10,000 a year. I just couldn't, you're just up against so many different people. I guess there just wasn't much that differentiated me at the time from a pile of applicants. So it was kind of my backwards way of getting into television. And again, none of that happens if they listen to me telling them that I want to stay beat an overnight talk show host. The only reason that happened was because I went out to be the beat reporter, got to know people, kind of grew, my name and brand, if you will, for lack of a better way of putting it, because that's terrible, kind of was able to grow, my standing in the sports community through doing that.
And what I love there, what you talked about, Dan, was when you're sitting in this interview with this person, you flat out told them, like, I know I can do this. Like, I know I can do this and I will do this. Like, you had that confidence. And I think you, and this is just my opinion, you telling that person, hey, I can do this, just, watch me. I think that's what got you that job because they saw that confidence in you. And like you talked about, like, you were trying to find so many different things at that time, job wise, but just from what I'm hearing for you, you never lost your confidence. You always.
No, I always believed I could do it. I always believed that I could do TV for whatever anybody thinks I am. I always believed that I could do it. And I still maintain I can go back and pull out a audition tape that I did. It was actually the night Mike Tyson lost to Buster Douglas. I was down at a friend's station and I put together a tape. And I look at it and I don't see a whole lot of difference from the guy that I am now, but still nobody wanted to hire me. So it's weird how this business works. But let me go back to what you were saying. Yes, it was confidence, but it was also desperation. It was also my reading the situation and kind of looking at him and seeing he wasn't getting the vibe from me that I had the experience that he was looking for to put out there as his field reporter for a major pregame show and a big part of what they do to cover the football team. And I was looking at him and I'm like, I gotta say something. I've got to, make him believe that I can do this job. It was my last shot. I had the lunch with him. We had the interview. I had gotten the sense that I hadn't made the impression that I needed to make. So it was kind of a Hail Mary. It was just the last thing I had. It was just, look, I can do this. I can do this. And would I have gotten it if I hadn't said that? I don't know the answer to that, but I felt like it was something that I needed to tell him just to kind of leave him with a thought because I felt like I was leaving him with a thought that wasn't very good.
What was that like, covering the team that you grew up watching? A big fan of the, Washington football team. It's still weird saying that, but like you said, you and I, we understand it.
Yeah.
Growing up, that's your team to watch. What was that like being able to cover, your childhood team that you love so much watching?
It was a learning experience. I think it was, I remember I was doing a talk show very early on. And John Feinstein had been somebody that I had known through other people working in a previous job. So John lived in DC. I'm doing a talk show. And I must have referred to the football team as we. And I got to a commercial and the producer said, hey, John Feinstein's on the phone for you. And I picked it up and he's like, Danny, don't say we. Never say we. And I was like, gotcha. It was a learning experience. Everything about it was a learning experience. Learning how to cover a team was a learning experience. Learning how you navigate a locker room was a learning experience. Learning how you as we said earlier, cultivate sources, do interviews, because, I had done them before, but here you're doing, 3, 4 a week for stuff that's happening during the week, for pregame shows, whatever it is. It was all a learning experience. And you know what? My belief is I was better on day 2 than I was on day 1. And I was better on day 3 than I was on day 2. And that's everything in this business is reps, is learning who you are, how to, how to act, how to do the job, all those things, from being in front of the camera to being in front of the microphone, to being in a locker room, to asking a good question, to understanding what the story is, to understanding how to impart that story to other people. It's all part of learning, and you don't go in with that knowledge, but as you make mistakes and grow, you gain that knowledge. And that's everything I've ever done, from a radio update to a TV update to play-by-play to anything. It's just learning on the job.
And you definitely did a lot in the mid 90s. I mean, we talked about the beat writing. We talked about, you were one of the hosts for the Washington Redskins pregame show. You were a weekend sports anchor. And not only that, but throw on top that you were a play-by-play announcer for NFL on Fox's regional broadcast. What did you learn, working with them at the time, that you took and brought it to the table to what you do today?
Yeah, I mean, that came about after I came to Detroit. And I was in Detroit I think my first year was 2000. I got to Detroit in 97. And in 2001, one of the two, I got a call from Fox, and they offered me the opportunity to go to NFL Europe and do games over there. And basically what they would do was they would send you over there for 2 weeks, and it's kind of a proving ground for them. And they give you the opportunity to see what you got. And I went over there and I did 2 games, one in Amsterdam and one in Berlin. And I came back and I had a very nice letter from a man by the name of Bill Brown at Fox Network. And he said, we appreciate you going. We like what you did. We're going to give you an opportunity to do an NFL game coming up. I did the season opener between the Lions and the Saints that year in New Orleans. And for the next 5 years, I did Fox NFL regional broadcasts. And my role kind of grew from a couple games to the last year I did it in 2004. I think I did 11 maybe. And so it kind of grew over the years, but it was amazing. And going to Europe was amazing, because I was working with these guys that did it every week for Fox, and learning how they produced a game and what was expected of me. And, I'd done play-by-play before, but not anything like that. And right. It was a challenge, and it was a little bit daunting. And it was, one of those ones where you put it on yourself to succeed, and you go over there and find a way to do it. So it was an amazing growth experience to go and do that. And then to have the confidence and, somehow make my way through my first NFL game without throwing up on my shoes, and, just kind of be able to do games from there for Fox, to work with the people that I worked with, just, veterans of NFL broadcasts, and the analysts that I worked with, which were terrific. And I don't even know how to describe it other than the most amazing learning experience that anybody could have, because you're surrounded by these people that are just at the top of their field, and it lifts you up, or it better lift you up. And I feel like it made me better, and I learned so much.
Were you working at Fox 2 when you were doing all this?
Yeah. Fox 2 was awesome. They saw it as me being in the family. Even though there were weeks where Fox would send me to do Arizona, Seattle, which took me away from here. Fox was great. I mean, they saw it as my general manager at the time, Jeff Murray, came down, sat in my office one day, and he had just taken the job, and I didn't even know that he knew much about my doing games for Fox. And he came and sat down one day. He goes, "So you're doing games for Fox?" And I said, "Yeah." And he goes, "I want you to do as many as you can. I want you, because it's good for you, and what's good for you is good for us." And that was just such an amazing thing to do, as my boss, to help me grow. And so I did that. And then the opportunity to do the Lions came along, which brought me a little closer to home, which made more sense. But, I'm forever grateful to Fox 2 for their attitude in allowing me to do that, because there's a lot of places that wouldn't, because truth be told, it took, their lead sports guy out on a lot of Sundays. So, I owe them a lot for giving me that opportunity to kind of advance my career, which they did.
And I think, one of the main talking points that has always come up on the podcast with all my guests has been how much of a great support system that he or she has had in their life.
Mhm.
And I think what you just said is a really cool example of that, is how your boss and all your colleagues, they were behind you 100% doing NFL Europe, calling all these NFL regional games. Whereas, some places you may not get that support. But whereas for you, you had that support. And I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, I think knowing that you had that support maybe kind of had you go, you know what, this definitely is a family, and it always will be.
Well, it certainly, it makes you feel like you need to give them everything you've got. Not that I feel like I wouldn't have, but I think it makes that bond even stronger. And I'm 24 years after I've gotten here, I can't tell you how appreciative I am, not just for that, but for everything that Fox 2 has done for my life, for my family. Look, when I came here 24 years ago, truth is, I thought I'd probably be here for a year or two, and then I was going back to DC, and you'd go back home. But this became home, and this became home for my kids. And, we had opportunities to do other things, but nothing ever made sense. This place has been too good to me, too good to us, too great a place to live and to have a family. So, look, 24 years at one place in this business is a blessing. It is a business that often people are uprooted, and you have to go somewhere else and start over and, sit down at a station and say, "Okay, everybody watch me, I'm the new guy." Well, that's not fun. And there's no guarantees that it's going to work out. And there was no guarantees that I was going to have, any ability to stay here for more than 2 decades when I got here. So, Anthony, I could spell out for you just the different kind of stars that have aligned for me in my life at Fox 2, the different things that have happened to allow me to be where I am. It goes a lot deeper than me or my abilities. There's been people around me, people behind me, people in front of me. There has been, just fortuitous timing, all these things. My wife, the support that she gives me. I mean, I tell people, I feel like she and I have just run through an obstacle course to get where we are today. The decisions that we had to make along the way, and that if we had to do it again, I wouldn't, because I'd be scared it wouldn't work out the same way, that we might make one decision differently that would just throw it all off. And I just think we've been so fortunate with the way that things have worked out.
I want to bring up the big topic of discussion, and you already mentioned the Detroit Lions. I've been a diehard Lions fan from day one, Dan. My dad and my late grandfather, they went to the games when the Lions played at Tiger Stadium. My late grandfather, he was at those games where they won the NFL championships back in the 50s.
Awesome.
When you took that job, Dan, how much did you know about the history of the franchise and the history of the Detroit Lions?
Well, I knew a lot because I had been here for 8 years when that opportunity came up. And I had been doing Lions pre and post game shows for Fox 2 before that. I will say, when I came to Detroit in 1997, I don't think I understood the depths of emotions that people have for this team and what they had been through. I mean, remember, I had come from a place in Washington where you felt like you had a chance to win the Super Bowl every year. When
Right.
Joe Gibbs was there, and even when George Allen was there and they got to a Super Bowl, I mean, you just felt like every year there was a chance something. So when I got here and people would say, oh, the Lions are never going to do this, they're never going to do this or whatever, I'm like, come on, man, they could turn this thing around. People say, no, you don't understand. And they would talk about what you talked about, my grandfather and my father and things like that. So yeah, I came to understand the history of the team very quickly after I got here. But by the time I took over play-by-play, I was well-versed in, all things Detroit Lions because I had been covering it and doing, shows surrounding the team for years at that point.
And just like, kind of talk about, I mean, we talked about it with my producer, Will Gatz, in the beginning. You mentioned the word heartbreak. As a play-by-play commentator, and for the many amount of years you have covered this team and called games, how does the fan in you not want to come out? And like, how do you keep that fan inside of you the whole time to the point where, so I'll use the Dallas game, the playoff game as an example. Like, we all know that pass interference pickup call was BS. Like, we all know that. Everybody here in Detroit. And if you and I were to talk about it off the air, you probably agree with me on that too. But
I'll agree with you on here.
All right, awesome. So as a fan, you want the team to succeed and win. But when something like that happens, like, how do you keep your composure like that on air? I don't know that I always do. I mean, you keep your composure in that you have a job to do. Right.
But I won't hide my disdain or disgust.
Yes.
For something like that. And I don't believe I did that day. I think, people hear in my voice what I feel. I don't beat around the bush. I'll tell you when something, whether it was the officials or the Lions or, whatever it is, I'm going to tell you. And I think, you have to be honest. You can't whitewash anything. You can't tell people something's black when it's white. You can't tell some people something's good when it's bad. You have to be fair, and you don't get personal, except maybe with the officials in the Dallas game. You have to be fair, but you can't hide from the truth. Yeah. I mean, it's funny. Sometimes people will say, "Oh, you're a homer." I'll say, "Yes, I am. I'm rooting for the Lions to win. There's no question about that." Right. And, the only place I draw a line is when people tell me, well, you may not call it the way it is. And I'm like, well, give me an example of when I didn't tell you something was bad when it was bad. Give me an example when something was bad and I told you it was good. I mean, we may be analytical about it. We may not sit there like you would at home and drop F-bombs or something like that. I mean, you have a job to do, but your job is being honest. And I think if you're honest, then there really is nothing anybody can argue with. It's happening right in front of you. You're just telling people what it is, good, bad, or indifferent.
And the 0-16 season, and I remember your call, like how you described it at the end of the Green Bay game. Just talk about that season, just in general, because I was a sophomore in college at Grand Valley State at the time, and it didn't matter what the record was. Again, I was in front of that TV in my apartment watching all the time. And even the Green Bay game, still watching it.
Yeah.
Just kind of talk about that season a little bit.
It was odd in that you're going through it and you still thought they had a chance to win every week. You knew they weren't good, but part of the charm of the NFL is the 7 days in between games. And you lose on Sunday, you're hacked off on Monday, you're coming around on Tuesday, you're looking at the next opponent on Wednesday, you're trying to figure out how they can beat them on Thursday. And by the time Friday rolls around, you're like, all right, if we do this, this, and this, can win the game. And that's what I think makes the NFL special. I don't care who you are. You believe when that game kicks off that if your team can do X, Y, and Z, you can win. Doesn't always work out that way. And a lot of times it doesn't. But I think going through that season, we still felt like they had a chance to win games. And by we, I'm talking about me and Brandy kind of going through that together. But we had a saying, which kind of was a mantra that we would say to each other throughout that season. And we must have said it, I don't know how many hundreds, thousands of times. Call the next play. Call the next play.
Okay.
Regardless of what the record is, there was a game happening in front of you and you needed to call that game. And that's what we did. We called the next play. And people always say, well, man, how'd you make it through those games? It wasn't the games that were necessarily the hard part. It was everything you had to do during the week when you had to interview the coach 3 times and you had to talk to players and they're hacked off and they don't want to smile. They don't want to joke. And you don't want to keep dwelling on, what just happened. You're trying to look ahead or trying to find some human interest angle or anything to talk about that can kind of change the conversation that's been talked about 100 times ad nauseum and maybe, give people something a little bit different in terms of entertainment. But it's the stuff during the week that's harder because there's so much pressure on them and it's all coming down on their shoulders. And the coaches are working 100 hours a week and not getting anything out of it. And the players are leaving their blood, sweat, and tears on the field, not getting anything out of it. And you're just trying to get your 5 minutes of an interview in and get it done. The game takes care of itself. Yeah. Because even if it's 42-0, there's a play happening in the fourth quarter and you call it and then you shut up and Brandy tells people what happened. And then you call the next one and you shut up and Brandy tells people what happened. And then the game ends, you do what you have to do and you go home. It's Monday that's much tougher when you have to start doing the recap and the interviews and all that stuff. That's where it gets really unpleasant.
And just that whole season itself, I don't think anybody ever thought 0-16 would ever be done in NFL history. We've seen teams that were on the cusp, like the Miami Dolphins, who went 1-15 a while back, but you never imagined it would happen. But I knew right after they went 0-16, I'm look, they're going to rebound. It's going to take some time. And they ended up.
There wasn't much of any other way to go.
Right. Exactly. The only way to go after that is up. But they drafted Matthew Stafford. They got Ndamukong Suh. Calvin Johnson was starting to come on his coming to his own. They got Javid Best, who at the time, in my opinion, if Javid wasn't hurt, he could have been a really great running back in the league. So you're putting all these pieces together and, they make the playoffs. But what I want to ask you is between the regimes of Jim Schwartz, Caldwell, and Patricia, what was kind of the differences that they all had? And was there any similarities between the three at all?
Well, I think 2014 under Caldwell was the best team
yes,
by far,
I agree.
Not even close.
Yeah.
That defense was historically good. Really just top notch, top 10 defense since the merger against the run. And, they would just churn people up. The problem was the offense wasn't very good that year. And the problem was, you had an offensive coordinator that was fired 7-8 games into the next season.
Right.
If they had one of Matthew Stafford's higher flying offenses or a better offensive scheme that year, that team was capable of making a run. I mean, that team was good. But they just weren't good enough, like I said, offensively. And, you look back at that Dallas game, they scored 14 points, went up 14-0, then stopped scoring, had 2 field goals the rest of the game. Couldn't come up with a big stop when they needed it defensively. But, I think Schwartz got them to a point where they made the playoffs. Caldwell kind of took it from there, made them more consistently good.
Yeah.
And then, I understood what they were doing when they let Jim go because they had kind of been on the brink, but they hadn't been able to do it. And you're looking for somebody that could take that next step.
Yeah.
Didn't end up being Matt Patricia, obviously. But again, I understand the thought process behind what Bob Quinn and the organization did, and I don't necessarily disagree with it. They had an opportunity to win a couple of division titles, couldn't finish it. Got to the playoffs, couldn't make it happen there. So you're saying, okay, good, not good enough. Where's the way to take the next step? For example, like the Pistons did with Rick Carlisle. Rick Carlisle goes, Larry Brown comes in, boom, different world. They were looking for their Larry Brown. They didn't find it. So the difference was just the different roster construction, different time. That 2011 team, look, if Javid Best doesn't get hurt, who knows how good that team is. That team was pretty darn good as well. But losing Javid took a lot of explosiveness away from that team. So, it's not to make excuses. They've not been able to deliver at some clutch times, and they've not had the stars aligned for them where, roster met coaching, met success, met good fortune with injuries. So, you got to keep trying. You got to keep trying to figure this thing out. And again, no excuses because other teams are figuring out a way to get it done. Now it's their time to figure out a way to get it done. New regime, that's what they're trying to do. And
you brought up the new regime, and just were you sold on Dan Campbell from day one after that press conference?
Well, look, if you're intimating that I have a problem with the press conference, I thought the press conference was great.
I thought it was
and too. I'm on a text thread with a number of guys in the media, some of whom are pretty miserable guys. And, so we had an exchange after that. And there was, number of people saying, and look, we've been through a lot of introductory press conferences in Detroit. We've had our share.
Yeah.
A lot of people were saying that's the best press conference I've ever seen. But the national media wanted to take 30 seconds of it where he talks about biting off kneecaps, 30 seconds of a 90-minute press conference. And they want to make that the story. Well, even in that moment, he was saying what fans around here needed to hear. And he didn't BS anybody. He didn't say we're a player away. He told them we're a ways away. And that being the case, I thought he did a great job. And look, Anthony, I can't sit here and tell you what kind of head coach Dan Campbell's going to be. I like a lot of the things that it seems like he stands for. I feel like he's resonating with the players, with the guys that I've been able to talk to, but you got to do it on the field. You should win your opening press conference. You should have people walking out feeling like this is it. We got the guy. People should walk out of a press conference feeling that way. That's kind of a free swing up there where you can try to get people fired up. So look, I'm anxious to see what he can do. I like the fact that they seem to have a plan, and the plan is to kind of tear this thing down to the studs and rebuild it. And, when Matthew was here, there was always this temptation to say, we've got this quarterback. If you can just put a couple players around him, you're there. Well, it didn't work. And I'm not putting that on Matthew because, that's probably a longer conversation, but I don't think organizationally they put the right pieces, defense, offense, everything. And it's not get Matthew more weapons. It's everything around him to take the pressure off him. I mean, a running game 1 year for him would have been great, but it was time for him to move on. It was time for them to move on and to try to say, okay, let's build this thing a different way. And I like the fact that they didn't go out and throw crazy money at people, that, they're trying to build this thing with young players. And some of those young players have to be ones that are already here who have to get better. So look, we're going to see where it goes together. I'm excited to see what happens with it. And we'll see where it goes. I think, people are happy with the coaching staff he's put together. People were happy with the draft that they had. So, you got to keep building. It's every day. It's getting better. It's improving your players. It's the things that you constantly have to do to be one of the best teams in the league. And that's what these guys are working on. And like I said, there's no way I can sit here and tell you how this is going to work out. We're all going to sit back and watch it together. But what I've seen so far, I like and I respect what they've done.
One of the things I loved about him, and before I ask you my last question, then we're going to have some fun here. I got some rapid fire questions for you that are goofy, serious, however you want to put it. The one thing I love about Dan Campbell right now is he understands the fan base. Like, he was a player here. He was on that 0-16 team. Like, he gets it. He understands it. And I think, like, if you have a coach, it doesn't matter if it's NFL, NBA, college, baseball, whatever, hockey. If you have a coach that understands your fan base, what they go through, in my opinion, that's a win, not only for your organization, but for your city as well.
Yeah. And I think, sometimes people don't understand when they get here what it's all about. But, the fact is that it's important to understand what the organization has been through. Sure. But that doesn't change the job that you have to do. That doesn't change the way that you have to build a team. Just because they were lousy in 2008, they had heartbreak in whatever year you want to put in there that there was heartbreak. You could put a lot of them in there. that doesn't change. Your understanding of that doesn't change what you have to do to build a good football team.
Yeah.
That is a different story in and of itself. And that is, drafting, developing, building, managing the salary cap, all those things. And that's not a byproduct of understanding the history of this football team. That's a byproduct of understanding how you build a football team. And so, I think it's important that they understand what the fans have been through and what the franchise has been about. But I don't think that necessarily you can allow that to shape the decisions that you make. You're making the best decisions for your football team in 2021. That doesn't have anything to do with what happened 13 years ago or 18 years ago or anything like that.
No, I love what you said there. I couldn't agree more. Last question I want to ask you, and then we'll get into rapid fire questions. Everybody here around the state of Michigan wants the dream of watching that victory parade on Woodward one day. And I've always been, and you've heard my messages before, you've heard me say it, be relentless, live your dreams, go and do your thing. Do you think we will see that one day? Do you think that dream of ours will come true one day?
Oh yeah. I mean, I look, they're no different than any other team. You're not destined to lose. There's no curse. There's nothing like that. You are a byproduct of your decisions. That's what has hurt them is the decisions that they've made in terms of whether it's GM, coaches, players, things like that. They haven't put it all together yet, but they have the same opportunity to put it together that every other team in this league has. And that's what they have to do. So I 100%, I sit here and I believe that that's going to happen at some point. I can't tell you when, but I say that because they have the same opportunity everybody else does. They have the same opportunity to build through the draft, to build through free agency, to develop their players, to put them on the field in the best positions, and to go out there and win games. So I don't know how anybody could in any way disqualify them from future success based on what's happened in the past. Because what Rod Marinelli did doesn't have anything to do with what Dan Campbell's going to do. What Matt Millen did has nothing to do with what Brad Holmes is going to do. What Bob Quinn did has nothing to do with what Brad Holmes is going to do. These guys are on their own. They will have their time to build this thing and to get it done. And their ability to either do it or not do it has nothing to do with the guys that have come before them, except in the instance of having to clean up some of the mess that was left behind. But ultimately, there will come a time where the cap is back in their favor, the draft picks are in their favor, the roster is their roster, and then it will be their show and their opportunity to win.
And it's like that old saying, you can't dwell on the past. Like, you just got to keep moving.
Doesn't do you any good.
Yeah, exactly.
You can learn from it. You better learn from it. But it's not necessarily just learning from the Lions' past. It's learning from all of the experiences that Dan Campbell has had and all the experiences that Brad Holmes has had, and learning what they did to build a winner with the Rams, what worked, what didn't work. And for Dan Campbell, what he did in New Orleans and what worked and what didn't work. So, again, it's what we talked about before. You're a byproduct of sometimes a lot of the things that people that you've learned from, and what can he take from a Sean Payton and bring here and apply and then put his own spin on it because he is his own man. So, it's their show. And when all is said and done, Anthony, if they fail in 5 years, that's not going to have anything to do with the guys that came before them. It's going to be on them. And they'd be the first to tell you that.
Well, I'm excited. I'm excited to have fans back in Ford Field this year, watching that place rocking, and I know you are. So it should be an interesting and fun year for our Detroit Lions. So I'm excited. So, all right, Dan, ready to have a little fun here?
Let's do it.
All right. So we have 10 rapid fire questions here. They are goofy, serious, however you want to put them. I like to call the first question the master's question because it is a tradition unlike any other. So question number 1, strawberry or grape jelly?
Strawberry.
Question number 2, your favorite NFL stadium you've been to that's not Ford Field?
Lambeau.
Yeah, you can't go wrong with that one. Question number 3, your favorite all-time athlete?
Oh, wow. Been a lot of them. Wow. I don't know how you differentiate between some. I would say my hero growing up was Sonny Jurgensen.
Okay.
And I would probably say Sonny. I got the opportunity to work with him when
Wow.
I was older and working in DC. And he was just such a amazing guy, that, you know, there's always a spot in my heart for Sonny, because he was that kind of that first guy when I was starting to pay attention to football that was the wow for me.
That's awesome. Question number 4, Jimmy John's or Subway?
Jimmy John's.
Very good. Question number 5, best motivational speaker not named Anthony Ianni.
Oh my gosh, that's a good one. You know, I produced a show for Tommy Lasorda back in the 80s, and he was supposed to give a speech to a group of salespeople, and he couldn't do it because there was a weather delay or something. So he had to do it over a microphone into a system that I had to record. And he gave this speech, and it was amazing. It was just, it made you want to jump up and just make your life better. I mean, he was the guy that you saw out there on the baseball field was kind of the same guy that he was. And it was really cool to have the opportunity to work with him when I did. And that one day, just sitting there listening to that speech was pretty amazing. And it was just, he just knew how to press buttons. He knew how to challenge people to be great. And there's the story of how he did that to Oral Hershiser, and how Hershiser tells a story about, you know, becoming the bulldog. And I've never forgotten just sitting in a studio, not really expecting anything, but that just being totally sucked in by this speech that he sent out to the group of salespeople because he couldn't be there. And it was really cool.
That's fantastic. Question number 6, your favorite sports story that you have covered?
Haven't done it yet. Lions Super Bowl. You know, I've been really blessed around here to walk into a Stanley Cup. You know, that was amazing. You know, I came in between the 2 back-to-back championships, and then obviously there were 3 after I got here. Being at Game 7, there's the up and the down. Pistons losing to San Antonio, that was terrible. But watching the Pistons win that championship that night at the Palace was incredible. I mean, it was just, I mean, Anthony, you're a basketball guy. That team just fit together so amazingly well. And they were perfectly made for one another. And just that night, watching the roof just come off the Palace was pretty incredible. I mean, there's a lot of them. I mean, when the first time the Tigers were in the World Series, you know, I went inside, and I'd never been to a World Series game before. And I just stood and watched for a while. And that was really meaningful to me too, just how this was the World Series. Now, obviously it didn't end up working out well for them, but you know, that always sticks out in my mind as well. I've been to some amazing boxing matches, you know, Spinks Tyson, just been at a couple of those. And I love, back in the day, covering boxing, which I did quite a bit of. So there's been a lot of them. I don't know if I could whittle it down to just one, because there's been so many just incredible moments. I wouldn't even know how you would differentiate them.
You mentioned that Pistons team. In my opinion, one of the greatest basketball defensive teams of all time in the NBA. Like when I have young,
I mean, they're winning games, 69, 68 or whatever.
That's the other thing. Like I had a kid say to me one time, it was actually one of the players I coach at Churchill. She goes, you know, like, why did you enjoy watching the Pistons so much? They only scored like 60 points a game. I said, because that's why the NBA was so great back in the day, because you had teams that locked everybody down, and they beat Shaq and Kobe. And they literally dismantled the Lakers in 5 games, literally and figuratively.
Yeah, the 5-game sweep. It was, that team was just such a joy to watch. And they were, you know, they could play kind of any style you wanted them to play. They could run up and down the court. They could grind it out with you. That was, it's funny. Jen interviewed Ben Wallace the other night, the night of the lottery.
Yeah.
It was like, I was sitting there watching it and I was just like, I came back on after she finished the interview and I said, right on the air, I said, man, doesn't looking at him just make you smile? When you think about the way that he played here, what he brought here, and what that group brought here together.
Yeah.
They brought a lot of joy to a lot of people. They were an amazing group that, might not have had, Ben's now a Hall of Famer, but might not have had the traditional superstars that we think about.
Right.
But man, I mean, Sheed was as good an all-around player as you're going to find, and Rip was, just nonstop on the end. And we know what Chauncey could do, and Tayshaun was Tayshaun, and Ben was Ben. It was just that guys coming off the bench could all play. It was just that team was just so much fun to watch, and a Hall of Fame phenomenal coach in Larry Brown.
Yeah. When they got Larry, that was the game changer after that. I mean, it was different.
No doubt.
All right, a couple more here for you. Question number 7. Name a Disney movie that you have watched more than 3 times with your kids.
Oh my gosh. See, my kids are older. It's been so long since, oh man, my wife will kill me if I don't come up with an answer. It's been so long since we watched Disney movies. That's a tough one. Now I'm sitting here. I'm gonna have to pass and come back to that one. She's gonna kill me.
How about The Lion King?
Lion King, perfect. If that's Disney, I don't even know if it is.
Disney.
Lion King, I watched so many times and was probably crying every time. But it was, that's 100%. That was right in my kids' wheelhouse.
I was gonna say Aladdin for my second guess too, because I love that one.
Nah, I don't remember watching Aladdin a lot. I'm sure they did. I don't remember watching it a lot. I just remember like when we, finally got the car with the DVD player, and just you'd hear, the same shows over and over and over in the back seat, to the point where you could recite them. Whether it was Pokemon or whatever it was. And it was but you learn now, you should have probably enjoyed those times a little bit more because they go so quickly.
I'm definitely trying to do that right now because my oldest is 6, shooting on a 10-foot rim with a men's ball already, which is crazy, and a 3.5-year-old. And they watch like the new movies like Frozen, Luca, like Toy Story, the new Toy Story. And I probably watched Toy Story now.
Toy Story's another one. Toy Story is definitely another one. I just have no recall of being able to name those movies. But oh my gosh, did we watch Toy Story a lot? No
and
question.
like you said, I'm pretty sure I could probably recite all 4 Toy Story movies if I want, because of the amount of times we watch them here at the Ianni household. So speaking of movies, question number 8: if you could meet one actor or actress, who would it be?
Actor or actress? I mean, probably De Niro, just because he's done so many things that have made such a huge impact on me. From Godfather 2 on, Taxi Driver is just such an amazing wide arc of work that he's had. I would probably say, him, Pacino, those are the type of guys that are in my wheelhouse that, when I became cognizant of movies and watching movies, that they were the guys that were really doing it. So I would say probably those 2 guys would be of interest to me to just sit down and talk to and pick their brain on what they've done and the amazing careers that they've had.
They are legends. There's no question about that. Question number 9: your dream vacation.
Australia, never been, always wanted to go. 2 of them, I'd say Australia, and then I'd say the other is Egypt. Strangely drawn to the pyramids and want to go. Have never been. I will do it one day. But Egypt has always been right at the top of my list. And for beaches and sun and all that, probably Australia is the one that I'd love to do that I haven't. But number one would, and my wife and I have talked about it a bunch of times, number one for me would definitely be Egypt. There's just something about, the structures and the, I don't even know if you call it history, just because it's older than that. Just that I'm amazed by them. I've watched the documentaries and the specials and things like that, and I would love one day just to be standing in front of them and just be able to see them.
I love it. Last question. Who do you admire the most?
Oh man, I go the cheap way and just say my mom and dad. You know, they gave me so much. My mom, you know, faced a lot of adversity in her life. She had MS, diagnosed the year that I was born, and, you know, lived 46 years with it. And it was a fight. And to watch her fight every day, and that fight got harder every day. And to watch the way that my dad took care of her, it was, you know, you learned about, I don't even know if you didn't really learn it because you couldn't process it. And I think I processed it more as an adult, but looking back now and just understanding, you know, what they went through on a daily basis. Just, I have so much gratitude to them for what they gave me, knowing the kind of fight they were in all the time. So I'm sure there's other people, you know, within my business or things like that, but I'm not here today. I'm not doing what I'm doing. I'm not, you know, the person I am without them. And it wasn't easy for them to, you know, provide myself and my sisters with the kind of life that we had without them being selfless and them also just dealing with a tremendous amount of adversity, literally every single day.
I love it. Absolutely beautiful. Last thing I'm going to have you do, I do this with all my guests. So my podcast airs on Mondays every month. I want you to give my listeners your positive message for the week for them. So the floor is yours, my man.
Well, here's what I'm going to give them. And it is one that I take from you. And it is one that I try to apply to my son as well. Never let anybody else define you. Never be defined by a diagnosis. Only be defined by what you can and can't do in your life. And I think that we all have to do that. We all have to be the best that we can be within our given talents, within our given abilities, and try to do that every day. I don't know if I've succeeded. I'm trying. I'm still trying. And I'll be trying until they tell me to, you know, get out of here and go home and retire. But, you know, you're such an inspiration to me, Anthony, for the way that you've conducted your life, the way that you've given to others. You know, your advocacy for those with autism, your advocacy for those anti-bullying campaigns and things like that. You know, be your best. Be everything you can be. Don't let anybody dictate to you what you can be. You are the person that will ultimately be the one that decides that. And if you become the absolute best that you can be, I don't know what more you could ask for.
I love it. Ladies and gentlemen, he is Fox 2's sports director, anchor, and the play-by-play announcer for the Detroit Lions, Dan Miller. Dan, my man, I cannot thank you enough for coming on the show. It's been an honor, and I can't thank you and your family enough for all your guys' support and what you've done for me. And I'm super grateful and blessed to have a friendship that we have, sir.
Well, you do have that. You always will. I appreciate you and everything you do, and thank you for having me. And this was fun. It's probably more than anybody ever needed to know about me, but I appreciate you having me, man.
I appreciate it, man. And we'll definitely stay in touch. All right.
You got it. Thanks, Anthony.
Thanks, Dan.
You got it.
I want to thank Dan Miller for coming on to the show today. Just an awesome conversation we had today. And like I said, I'm a diehard Detroit Lions fan. And for us to get into the conversation about the franchise, what needs to happen going forward, what the excitement for the new regime of Dan Campbell and Brad Holmes taking over, just a great, incredible conversation with Dan. Can't thank him enough for coming on. And who knows, maybe we'll have him on again one day after the Lions win the Super Bowl. So I'm going to knock on wood on this. I don't jinx anything. But I wanted to send, for my message of the week this week, I wanted to send everybody out on this note. And Dan brought it up, and he basically put the ball on the tee for me and, set it up for me to kick the game-winning field goal. And yes, I'm using football terms this week. But Dan talked about you can't dwell on the past. You can learn from the past and move forward. Learn from your mistakes. And for my message of the week, you can't dwell on the past, ever. Because if you dwell on the past in life, you're going to end up having regrets. And if you have regrets in life, those regrets will eat at you each and every single day of your life. And you will be brought down for the rest of your life filled with regret. So obviously no regrets, but don't dwell on the past. Now, learn from your mistakes. Learn from the past. Learn what you could have done better back in the day. And then move forward and use those life lessons and mistakes to help you become better at what you do, whether it's your job, whether you're a coach, an engineer, a teacher, educator, administrator, whatever, an athlete. Learn from your past mistakes and keep moving forward. And I think that's the one thing, like Dan talked about when it comes to the Detroit Lions. The new regime of Brad Holmes and Dan Campbell, they can't dwell on what Matt Millen did. They can't dwell on what Jim Schwartz and company did. They can't dwell on what Martin Mayhew did. They can't dwell on what Bob Quinn and Matt Patricia did. They can't. They can learn from their mistakes in the past that they made, but take those mistakes, learn from them, and you got to move forward. So you make sure that they don't make the same mistakes again. And that's definitely the life lesson I took, talking about the Detroit Lions tonight. And it's funny because, some people have asked me, well, what do you learn from sports teams? Well, you learn about heartbreak. We talked about that quite a bit tonight with Dan. You learn about heartbreak, but also you learn about how you can't dwell on what happens in the past. And you just got to keep moving forward. So there may be days where you question whether or not you can move forward. But again, don't dwell on it because you will be brought down with regret in life. And there's nothing worse than having regrets in life, wishing you could have done this, you could have done that. I wish I would have given more to my team. I wish I would have given more to my coworkers, my colleagues. Don't dwell on the past. Keep moving forward, keep stepping. One of my favorite Allen Iverson quotes of all time was, there's going to be 1 billion people that hate Allen Iverson. There's going to be 1 million people that love Allen Iverson. But focus on the ones that you truly love in life and keep stepping forward. Don't dwell on the past. Keep stepping forward. Learn from your mistakes and become better as a person or whatever you do in your profession. So that's my positive message of the week for you guys. Thank you all so much for joining us again. When I said before the first episode with Xavier Tillman this month, I said this was going to be our greatest lineup that we have ever had for the Center Podcast. And I'm super excited to announce on the next episode, we will have former Purdue Boilermaker star and current ESPN and Big Ten Network basketball analyst, Robbie Hummel. I am super excited for this episode. I'm super excited to chat with Robbie, and I'm looking forward for you guys to tuning into that as well. Thank you guys so much again. Have a great rest of your week. Peace and love, guys. Thank you so much.
Anytime you're shortcutting it, you're probably cheating some people. Players play. Tough players win.